In what was supposed to be a rebuilding year for us, turned out to actually be a little bit better than we ultimately expected it to be after starting out really, really bad. We ultimately finished the year at 8-9, but the biggest thing for us heading into the future, particularly in this year's draft, is all of our first round picks. How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Washington Commanders franchise mode, as I stumble over my words there, as we take a look here at the final of, or as we get into the first episode, the off-season episode for season number 6. Just taking a quick recap here. Kansas City Chiefs won the Super Bowl. I think that's the third time in our series that they have. So they got the first one over Dallas. They ended up losing their rematch against Dallas. Then the Buccaneers won. Then ultimately where we fell to the Ravens in the Super Bowl. And then they've gotten to their third and got their second Super Bowl out of 3. So Kansas City Chiefs really continuing on with that dynasty here in our franchise mode. And really for us, it's just going to be absolutely huge getting this offseason. But pretty much one of the biggest things that we are going to need to see for the future is what Lance Klein continues to be. Obviously, he's a fairly good quarterback, sitting at a 95 overall with that strong arm, but he's definitely going to need to improve. His numbers this year weren't as great. Granted, the team was definitely a little bit worse on offense, but he's definitely going to need to be better if this team is going to get back to the promised land. And, you know, for me here at the moment, I'm sitting back going, obviously, we need to nail this draft. We need to nail the draft after that. And if the team continues to not really meet expectations, we might have to go looking for a new place to call home. So just giving a quick reminder of what the draft class currently looks like. We have the Lions, Steelers, Dolphins, Chargers, and Saints, all with top 5 picks. I know we have a bunch. Our first pick comes at pick number 11, then we have pick number 13, and then continuing on, we have pick number 20, 24, and 25. Those are our first round picks here in this particular draft. Let's take a look at each of them and where they think we're actually going to do. Skylar McDowell, the wide receiver out of Stanford, is a player that they think they're also going to choose. Jaden Hughes, then going all the way down, Perry Thorne, another defensive end, and then left tackle Ralph Hughes, and then Brandon Flathery. No idea if I'm saying that one right, but let's get into the first stage of our re-signing and see who we're potentially going to bring back. Obviously, one of the biggest issues that we had last offseason is that we really just couldn't re-sign anyone because we just didn't have any money. But just taking a look at some of the players that we have right here, looks like we don't really have anyone necessarily too special that's going to be leaving the team. Connor Williams is a guy that we're definitely going to need to take a look at, but some of the top guys, Jahan Dotson, 29 years old, again, I don't really want to be losing another premier wide receiver, but at that 29, you know, he's not necessarily going to be that much more use for us heading into the future. He does look like he wants to re-sign, so maybe we'll be able to get him on kind of like a 2-year deal. But Darius LeBlanc, our left guard, and then Ricky Northrup, these guys are 2 younger players, both stars, so it wouldn't be necessarily too bad of an idea to try to re-sign these guys. Definitely LeBlanc more than Northrup, because LeBlanc is 24, Northrup is 27. Isaiah Simmons, this guy has just been so good for us. It would feel almost insulting for us not to try to re-sign him. Jermaine Davis, he has definitely just started to slip in overall, playing throughout the most of the year at like 83, 84, now going to a 79 with that drastic drop. Alex Phelps, I do want to try to re-sign him because he's been one of those guys that has been a part of our team, and we've kind of had him pinned to one of those linebacker roles. Levi, no. Malik Hooker, we're going to move on from. Jordan Brooks, again, we're going to move on from. And then again, I would love to try to bring back both of these guys as well. Maybe try to look for an upgrade over Connor Williams, but he is fairly interested in us. So let's just take a look at some of the guys that we're going to have to try to re-sign, and I'll show you once we get them. So for us, we definitely wanted to keep Jahan Dotson around. It definitely wasn't our top need, but only having Luke Hunt on the roster, I know we had Hart, who was definitely a bit of a surprise for us last year as a rookie, but we got Jahan Dotson on for a 2-year, $10 million per season deal. So I'm actually just dumb and I didn't realize that LeBlanc was a 5th-year option, so we don't actually have to worry about trying to re-sign him just yet. So that's actually going to be really good for us. But let's take a look here and try to sign some other players first. Getting back Isaiah Simmons, a guy, again, he has just basically been one of our best signings throughout this series, doing kind of it all. Tackle machine, a sack getter, just kind of been the leader of our defense, I would say, for the last couple of years. Bringing him back is making me happy. So we were able to get Connor Williams back on the team for a 2-year deal. He initially wanted a 1-year deal, so I ended up getting him down to that 2-year, so ultimately pretty happy with that. And then finally getting our punter Ryan Stonehouse locked up to a 4-year deal. So for us, pretty much everyone else I'm electing to allow to go. Alex Phelps, unfortunately, did not take our deal, so he's going to test free agency. But I am going to keep an eye on him during that free agency period, see what, just seeing if he just gets any actual offers. But speaking of free agency, let's get into it. So these are the 3 guys in free agency that I am arguably going to try to bring onto the team. Wide receiver Dontavion Wicks, he is an 81, 28 years old, trying to get him to that 2-year deal. Definitely trying to just have a more well-rounded wide receiver room, obviously with Hunt being our main guy. DeJuan Jones as the right tackle. I've kind of thought about it here, is that if we can get DeJuan Jones on our team, he brings size and strength onto the right side, and we can throw Nix at that right guard position and maybe, just maybe, have a little bit of a better situation at that right guard spot. And then again, we've tried to re-sign Alex Phelps. Ultimately not too worried if we do or don't get him. Would like to keep him on the team, but if he ultimately decides to go somewhere else, we basically just threw him the same offer that we did during the re-sign phase. But let's see if we get any of these guys. Ultimately getting Dontavion Wicks and DeJuan Jones, but let's see if we get Phelps. Is he being targeted by someone? He ultimately is. I think we are completely out of the running here. Just continuing on. We don't get him back, but that actually saves us a little bit of cap money moving forward. So Dontavion Wicks and DeJuan Jones both making their way onto the roster. So with the first overall pick in the 2029 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Keywan Goody, outside linebacker out of LSU, likely trying to get their edge rusher of the future. I know Aiden Hutchinson, I'm not sure if he's still on the team, but he is. He's definitely starting to get up there a little bit more into age. He's definitely not super old, but he's starting to get up there, and so I guess either they're trying to find a replacement if he ultimately did leave the team, or just trying to find a younger guy to play alongside him. Taking a look here at the Steelers and who they are going to select, it is going to be Kurt Montgomery, quarterback out of Stanford. Going to be, looks like the Steelers are getting their quarterback of the future, but like as per usual for these drafts, we will immediately sim to our next pick. So with the 11th pick, we are ultimately going to go with strong safety Luke Winslow. We need some more secondary help, and yes, we did draft a safety last year in the first round, but this guy has that hidden dev trait and should ultimately be a really good player for us. And honestly, just kind of what we've seen from our secondary this year, it's definitely starting to get old. Our safeties aren't necessarily the guys that might be leading us into the promised land, into the future. So getting a young guy like Winslow coming out of Alabama, I know they've had some good safeties come out of that school before too, so should be a pretty decent pickup for us. So I decided to make a trade with the Las Vegas Raiders, moving us back one, two, three spots in the draft. You know what? They decided to give us a handful of late round picks, 2 sevenths and a six, just for this quick little move back. Not all in this year, but just trying to get a few more late round picks. Again, I know I like to typically use those just to kind of maneuver around, so having a little bit more extra ammo in that department is not something I'm ever going to be too upset about. So after trading down with the Raiders, I'm doing something that I think is a little bit despicable in the NFL, drafting a running back in the first round, but we do kind of need to find that guy to ultimately replace Brian Robinson Jr., and we find Bryce Jefferson, running back out of Ohio State. He has that hidden dev trait, so you know what? Just trying to get that number one running back. Our running game was still pretty good last year, but getting this true number one guy, I am not going to be too upset about that. I would typically move away from showing you any more picks, but I am going to show just all of the first round because they're kind of the important guys. So stick around, or I guess please stick around for the entirety of the video. But yeah, we'll get to our next first round pick. So with our next pick, we ultimately go with left tackle Brandon Flathery. Again, left tackle not necessarily our biggest need, but he could be one of those guys that ultimately slots into kind of that DeJuan Jones position a little bit more into the future, kind of playing a little bit of a backup role, but we could shift him and move him around on the line because he does have that hidden depth trait. So just getting some more pieces for the future, definitely like seeing that. So our second Ohio State player in the first round, this time it is Connor McCain, wide receiver, has that really good acceleration and speed, an absolute speedster, change of direction and agility, but definitely first time that we've really drafted a wide receiver kind of planning for the future. Again, this draft really is a lot of guys really looking towards the future. Again, Jahan Dotson is one of those guys that we did just re-sign to a 2-year deal, but trying to get some more young guys. He unfortunately is only a normal, so we're just going to kind of have to see how his career ultimately develops with us. And then finally, with our last pick in the first round, and the last pick that I'm actually going to show you is free safety Deshaun Richard out of Oregon State. So we actually find our two future safeties, or maybe our safeties of now, in this one, getting our strong safety and our free safety, so potentially allowing us to be pretty flexible with what we can do with our current guys. Again, we didn't sign anyone this particular year, so it's going to be really interesting to see how this first round with our 5 guys all turns out to be. So, as per usual, we will always take a quick look just genuinely at the draft class as a whole, or some of the early on picks, just to kind of see what some of those guys were at the top of the draft. And I gotta be honest with you guys, kind of taking a look at this draft class in general, I don't think it was that great of a class, but here are the top 8. The highest up there is McDowell at a 77, but let's take a look here at, if funny enough, it was Skylar McDowell, the top player, but James Boykin, and then we also had Ben Newsome, the left guard, being the top 2 guys, Chris Howard, and then we also had a couple guys here in the second round also be the top end guys. But yeah, 77 overall being the top player in the actual draft does not give a lot of great ringing endorsements to this draft. So let's just kind of see how we did. So our first pick, Luke Winslow, a 75. So hey, you know what? We got a hopefully pretty good looking player moving on for the future, but Bryce Jefferson at a 76, so he's only 2 rating below, or pardon me, he's actually only 1 rating below the top rated guy. So we got one of the best players in the draft. Flannery, yeah, not really sure how to say that last name. He's a 73, but Connor McCain, he's actually a 75 overall, so this guy could actually potentially be really good for us in the future. Richard, he is a 73. I drafted Lloyd Townsend, He also had a hidden dev trait in this particular class. He is a center at 74, so it's good to know that we have a guy to replace Connor Williams either at the deadline or in the future, so that's always good to see. Barry McClendon, he is a 72, also has a hidden dev trait, and then the rest of the draft, I legitimately just threw everything at potential defensive line. I'm pretty sure Ricky McCoy, it was either him who I was looking at potentially moving to a defensive end or defensive tackle spot. It was pretty much just after McClendon. I just kind of said, you know what, I'm going to go after. I'm pretty sure one of these guys, yeah, it was Nathan Moorhead. I'm actually going to move him to defensive tackle. As you can see there, 6'6", 300, just a little bit shy, under 300 pounds. So I'm going to move him to defensive tackle just to see what he is going to look like, because again, we kind of need some of that D tackle help. What he went from there actually goes up to a 67, so definitely more of a natural fit. Andrew Hyder, I can't remember if he was a dev trait. No, he was not, but going to be kind of more of a depth guy. And then just continuing to look through at this, drafted a fullback, Jeff Skinner. He is a 70 overall, and Anthony Hardy, I just really like the look of him at the end of this. He was a pass coverage guy, 62. So, I mean, like, nothing terribly great, but yeah, pretty much I just don't think this was all that great of a draft, but you know what? We got some really good players at the top end from kind of our air quotes lottery picks. But definitely not the type of year that you would want to have with all of these draft picks, but that was the year that we had. But let's move forward. So right before we get into the regular season action, might as well take a look here at our lineup. No real surprise with Hunt and Dotson as our main two, and then we have Wicks and McCain. I was going to say McCallum, but that's not it. But it is indeed McCain going to be our two kind of main backups, and then Hart is going to be our fifth. In Zerma, DeBlanc, Williams, Nix, and Jones are going to be our starters. I'm going to keep a pretty good eye on both Williams and Nix and Jones, to be honest with you, just to see if our two dev trait boys or hidden dev trait boys, if these guys start to really start slacking, I might decide to replace at any moment Nix with Townsend or Flathery, and same thing with Jones or Williams. Pretty much for the center or guard, it would definitely be more Townsend, because you can see he's actually a 76 overall guard, and Flathery, yeah, I'm just going to go with Flattery. He will definitely be replacing Jones if he doesn't do that well. And in Zerma, and just in case he starts to really fall off as well. But taking a look here at our defensive side of things, Winslow and Richard are going to be both of our two main guys there. Leslie Moody, obviously, and Wilson are two main guys. And then our top two corners going to be kind of the main situation there. And I'm really liking Isaiah Simmons, Whitington, and Goodrich, who was one of our kind of sneaky good draft picks in last year's draft, being our main linebacking core. He still has some development to go, but McClendon, he's going to be behind Isaiah Simmons, but our two safeties going to just kind of get the instant start to just trying to grow and develop them. Theo Barry, he's actually going to be on our specials. We'll take a look at our specials first. He's going to be our nickel corner, so he's going to get a fair amount of playing time throughout. Luke Hunt going to be playing out of the slot. I kind of realized last year that one of the bigger reasons why he wasn't getting as much is because he's so good out of the slot. You might as well kind of keep him there. He's still going to be our number one receiver, and he's going to play on the outside as well, but he's just so good out of the slot that it's going to be hard to take him out of that. But yeah, that's kind of our specialist there. And then taking a look here at our special teams, Hart is ultimately going to be the main guy on kick returns and punt returns. So he is going to actually get a handful of playing time throughout this year. A little bit of a demotion from the young man who ultimately had a pretty good year, just ultimately depth-wise, just doesn't really fit the scheme, but that 911 yards, the 6 TDs, he was really, really good. So if we're starting to see a little bit of lack in production, he might just get that instant boost. But I kind of thought this was just going to be the offseason, but I think what I'm going to do for this one, and again, I'm always trying to see what the best way to format these videos are, is I'm going to actually do the first 4 weeks of the season before we get into part 2 of year number 2. So let's get into the opening part of the season. So as per usual, we will take a look at all of the games that we win and kind of go through these stats, but if we don't, then this is going to be a lot shorter, but we will go to week 4, and that's ultimately where we will end off in the video. Hopefully we see each other at least 4 more times as opposed to no more times just in the once to ultimately end off the video. But looking at Seattle, that 89 overall offense, the 84 defense, 86 overall, definitely edging us out in all of the departments. But hopefully we can get a win here in week number 1. So we ended up getting our first win of the season. Unfortunately for us, we had to go up against an old friend from all the way back in season 1, Sam Howell. Good to see that he's still getting a bunch of playing time in the NFL. I remember he signed like a 5-year deal with the Rams a couple of years ago, but he definitely outdueled Lance Klein, both throwing an interception, but Sam Howell getting the 2 passing touchdowns. He was sacked ultimately twice. Bryce Jefferson, our rookie running back, ended up getting a rushing touchdown. So did Blackburn. So did Klein. So you know what? I'll give Klein a little bit of a break getting that in there. Taking a look at a receiving game. Vix, he ended up getting the 96 yards and a receiving touchdown, while also getting the 42 yards from Jahan Dotson and the 35 from Luke Hunt with the 4 receptions. So not necessarily where I'd want those yards to be, particularly taking a look here. Chris Nix gave up the sack from his right guard spot. Whittington having the 9 tackles. He's been actually having a really good year. I think he's close to 30 tackles in the 3 games. So fortunately, I'm kind of spoiling that there. So we are 1 and 2. But taking a look here at the sacks, Isaiah Simmons got 1. Whittington and Mayo also getting a sack, and then Jamal Adams, our backup safety, getting the interception for our first win of the year. So unfortunately for us, the first 4 games of the season, we ended up going 1 and 3, having some close games with the exception of the first one where the Seahawks kind of really took it to us, but we ended up falling 28-21 against the New England Patriots. Definitely not the start that we wanted to have in this particular year, but I always need to remind myself, Klein is definitely one of those quarterbacks that is a little bit of a slower performer, and this team definitely has always had a little bit more of slower performances in the early stages of the year. But let's take a look at the stats, man. So taking a look here at Lance Klein, the 900 passing yards to the 6 TDs, the 4 interceptions, not a great completion percentage, does have the 4 sacks, so he's only being sacked once per game, which is a pretty good average if you ask me. We definitely want him to be much better, especially with how much we are paying him. Really annoying if you ask me, just the lack of production early on in this point. If he's going to be a franchise quarterback, he needs to be a hell of a lot better. Taking a look here at our rushing, Bryce Jefferson, for what he's at right now, being a rookie, 261 rushing yards to the 2 TDs. Lance Klein also getting into the end zone twice. So he's at least getting some touchdowns on the ground. Taking a look at our receiving game, Jahan Dotson with the 241, 3 TDs, Wicks, and then Luke Hunt, actually, funny enough, is our lowest of the 3 main guys, which is shocking to say the least, because that just shouldn't really be happening from where he is. Taking a look at Jefferson, not much of a receiving threat, unfortunately, but still a player nonetheless. Taking a look here at the blocking, Connor Williams has looked quite good so far, but Chris Nix, Inzerma, and LeBlanc, With Nix, I'm not sure if that's enough for me to really warrant him being rotated out as of yet. I know he's on the last year of his deal with us, so we're not going to be too worried if we have to bench him, but you definitely like to see that better. And Williams, I guess, understands that he has, a young guy behind him who's more than willing to step up. But yeah, Whitington leads the league in tackles with 47. He's just an absolute monster right now. Taking a look at the sacks, of course, Isaiah Simmons, just an absolute monster. But Stephen Norwood with a sack and a half, Whitington with a sack, but Leslie Moody with only the one so far this year. That's really frustrating to see, and we unfortunately only have the one interception. Do we have a defensive touchdown? I wonder. No, we do not. But taking a look here at the kicking, Mason Duggan has been perfect. 11 for 11 on the touchdowns and 1 for 1 on the kickoffs or on the field goal attempts. So, unfortunately, that is where we are going to end this particular episode off here today. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us here today, guys, and make sure to check back to the channel. If you like the video, please hit the like button, and if you really like what you see, post a lot of Madden content and other fun gaming stuff, so please consider subscribing to the channel. But until then, peace.